and he was born in 1918. What was your first job after leaving high school or other formal education?
Well, when I was graduated from high school, I was in with my dad farming, and so I took, that was my vocation, and I took 4 years in high school to become a farmer. I took vocational agriculture in the old Ridge building, which is now Lincoln View.
How much money were you paid for this work?
Well, my dad and I had an agreement that I would get so much of the crop that we produced at that time on so many acres. And he gave me 25%, and he took 75%, but all I done was do the work and take care of and harvest the crop. And then he furnished all the expenses.
Where at the time did most of the people that you knew work?
Well, back then, there was 50% of the people in Van Wert County was farmers. So we did not have any factories at that time. There was a few. Borden Cheese was built in 28, and of course it's gone already, but it was one of the biggest Liederkranz cheese factories in the world. And of course then we had the Sunoco, which was back then, they called it the box factory. It was built in around 27 and 28, and that was a big thing for Van Wert County. We also had a cannon factory, the Stoops Packing Cannon Factory, and it's out of business now, but it was here for, I would say 50 years. And they harvested crops, and they hired the people and they would work, and they got very little money at that time. I don't know if also I wanted to say the insurance building was built in about that time too, 28, and they hired a lot of people in that factory.
What were the highest paying occupations of that time?
Well, actually, back in then, we went through the Depression when I was in school, and there was not very high wages paid. The wages was about 50 cents a day to $1 a day, and then the teachers got about as much as anybody. They got back then about $2,000 a year, and the superintendent was getting $3,000.
Based on average annual income at the time in America, how much did people pay for a home or rent, an automobile, or other form of transportation?
Well, you take back then an automobile you could buy for about $600, and your tractors there was very few tractors back in then, but when the first tractors come out, they sold for around $600 to $900, depending on the size, and machinery to start in the farm costs very little today. It is enormous the amount of money you have to pay for machinery. Is there anything else on that question? I didn't read that question.
For a home or rent a home?
Well, to rent, we had people out in the country rented houses for about $20 a month, and which was not very much money at that time, but also they wasn't earning very much, so there wasn't too much that way.
Who is the President of the United States, and can you name any other leading politicians?
Well, back in 28, Hoover was, and of course that was during the Depression, and there wasn't much done. Everything was in a turmoil at that time, and then Roosevelt was elected in 32, and he put out a New Deal, and which today is our farming program, but everything seemed to go up from 32, and no matter what you invested then, that you come out with more money.
Name as many top radio and/or TV or movie entertainers as you can.
Well, back then we had no TV. Very few had radio. And who had radio, the main man that I can remember was Lowell Thomas at 6:45 with the news. And he was on a long time. And then, of course, Amos and Andy came on after that, and the big program, Death Valley Day, was the story hour, and it come on at 9 o'clock, and of course at 10 o'clock everybody was in bed.
List the leisure activities you participated in and cost, if any.
Well, I had 4-H like they have today. That was just starting. And the FFA, I was a vocational agriculture student. And I was one of the first American farmers in the state of Ohio back in 39.
If you were to enter the job market today, what career choice would you make and why?
Well, I think if I would I think I would be a teacher. And farming is getting so, there's only 2% of the population now is farmers today, and it's just too hard to get in. It costs too much money.
Okay, well that's all the questions I have for you, so thanks for doing the interview.
You betcha.